because I know there's the stigma, the stereotypical of athletes, to go off and make money, this and that, and date the opposite color, opposite race. But for me now, where I am, it's not even about color. It's not even about race. My experiences with black women growing up wasn't so good. When I started dating white girls, my first experience with white girls is when I went to college. I tried to date some black girls when I was in college. They did not like me. I was skinny. I was strong.
Right.
I was teased from high school, even to college. I got teased for being dark skinned.
So this channel serves as essentially a United Nations for the Black gender war. And basically what that means is this is a neutral place for men to be heard, for women to be heard, for us to properly center the problem and prioritize the solutions. One of the recent videos that I'm the most proud of was an interview that I did with Dr. Tiasan Johnson, and he basically helped me explain Black masculinity to 5 different levels of Black girls and Black women, starting with, ages 7 to 12. And basically what I aimed to do with that interview was translate or help women better frame the experience of being a Black man, help women better empathize with the nuances of our plight. Very often during this gender war, we simply compare our wounds. And that's where you get intersectionality, because from that perspective, women are disadvantaged twice. They are women and they're Black. And this is one of the things that he talked about. That isn't as clean cut as we would assume. And very often, especially in an American context, Black men are disadvantaged for being Black, but are then also disadvantaged for being men. And one of those disadvantages is the fact that we are not empathized with. Our experiences are trivialized, our experiences are laughed at. And in some way, shape, or form, the only way that we can be understood is as a perpetrator, not as a victim. And this TO situation is a perfect example. Kind of like I talked about with the Travis Kelce video, the truth is, internationally speaking, our women are not competing for the best and the brightest amongst us, right? T.O. is a Hall of Fame football player. And just like I talked about in the video, Patrick Mahomes Sr. and Patrick Mahomes Jr. have both found white women to marry and procreate with. Travis Kelce, a white man who was dating a Black woman, has also now found a white woman. And whether or not we choose to recognize it, some of the aspects of our culture, especially amongst our women, make them difficult to live with, particularly to bond with for a lifetime. And most of those things are unintentional. Most of our women are harboring their own traumas. And as such, it's impossible or near impossible to listen to men's trauma, particularly given the fact that men across the board are not empathized with. So Black men in particular can't be. And as men like T.O. talk about the reasons why they found themselves with non-Black women, as opposed to taking a seat and listening to understand, not to respond, not to demean, not to shame, insult, or guilt, the reflex tends to be, you didn't want us to begin with. And what's particularly infuriating about this is, at the very same time, we as men are asked to empathize with all the things that happen to women in their youth, all the major and minor traumas that they experience of not feeling pretty enough, not feeling smart enough, not feeling loved enough. But in Black men's experiences with similar things, it's typically not taken seriously. Now, he's talking about being made fun of for being too dark, which is something most dark-skinned Black men have experienced. Not being hood enough, not being masculine enough, not being pseudo-masculine enough. And that's the reality. That's the reality of what a lot of boys are experiencing in middle school and high school. And just like women's experiences in elementary school shape who they become as adults and shape their triggers and shape what they gravitate towards, some of those seemingly inconsequential things shape how men turn out as well. And we can continue to go with the narrative of he get on and then he leave you for a white girl. Or we can ask ourselves, why does he leave for a white woman? What is it that the white woman or the Hispanic woman or the Indian woman provides that we are failing to provide? And instead of us earnestly confronting that question, we would rather focus on low-hanging fruit. Oh, he likes her because of her hair. Oh, he likes her because of her nose. He likes her because of her complexion. Because I can deal with that. That puts the onus on him. That returns the responsibility to him for being a shitty, colorist, misogynistic pig, as opposed to maybe, just maybe, there's something that Ashley or Ming Lee or Gabriella is able to provide that we're not able to provide as a Black female delegation. But again, you have to get in the habit of actually listening to men to get to that point. But unfortunately, like I said, our habit in our community is to dismiss men while simultaneously begging men to communicate more. Ultimately, not only are young boys paying attention, and now young boys, now more than ever, are more likely to date outside of their race. They are more likely, just like Dr. Tia Johnson said, to date women who are not representative of their mothers. Now, the question is, are mothers going to own that? Are mothers going to take that personally and decide that we're going to set a new precedent? We're going to set a new paradigm. Because again, part of the reason why your son isn't enthusiastic about Black women is because the example that he had growing up was shit. Shit maybe because she was masculine. Shit maybe because she was overbearing. Shit because she didn't, for whatever reason, do a good enough job representing femininity or creating a paradigm where he identifies femininity with a Black woman. And maybe that goes all the way back to the man that you chose to procreate with and not vetting his character properly. So he left you high and dry. And now you have to play mommy and daddy. And obviously you're not going to play mommy as well because you have to play daddy. Now, when that kid is 14, 15, 16, and he goes to middle school, he goes to high school, and all those paradigms of Black womanhood are confirmed because those little girls who are also coming from problematic situations are also masculine and are also pedestalizing unproductive and dangerous paradigms of Black masculinity. So much so that they insult men who don't fit that mold. And later down the line, when they become single mothers by men who did, they're expecting the men who didn't, who are now successful, to spin the block and come right back to them. And it's this vicious cycle of confirmation bias.
So let's say if a study was done and you're 75% more likely to sustain and obtain a healthy, happy marriage, right? But you have to get rid of social media for it. Are you going to choose the marriage or are you going to choose social media?
If my whole life did not depend on my social media, I would happily say, all right, I'll get rid of it. So my answer still stands.
So
I think a fair thing to say in this case is that my husband and I will discuss it, and my husband and I will make a decision on what's best for our family. I understand that Instagram, Facebook, social media is a gateway opportunity for people to get reacquainted with past loves and all of these things. But at the end of the day, you need to have self-discipline. How many other things are you going to start to chip away and box me into so that you can feel more safe and secure? Why don't we just work on...
What are we... Like, this is just being not heard.
Rico, I don't even understand why you're not understanding the connection to what we're saying with this whole Instagram stuff.
The thing that you guys aren't understanding.
Part of the reason why young men are not enthusiastic about marriage is because we're seeing that young women are not enthusiastic about being wives. They, however, are enthusiastic about weddings. Just like we see in this clip, the prompt is simple. Would you be willing to give up social media for your relationship? And there are multiple studies, there are multiple things that point towards the fact that giving up social media would be healthier for the long-term sustainability of your relationship. However, these women struggled. These women outright said no. Their social media presence, their social media involvement is more important than their husband and than the sustainability of their relationship. How are young men supposed to be enthusiastic about building with women like that? So that's on top of the traumas that these young men have experienced from women, on top of the terrible branding of women, and then learning that these women are not interested in you. They're not interested in respecting you. They're not interested in building with you. They're simply interested in what you do for them. And part of what you do for them is give them the opportunity to be a princess for a day and take cute pictures and make their friends jealous. But something as simple and trivial as giving up Instagram, that's too difficult. And now that the world is more accessible, unfortunately, the reality is these men are going to take their business elsewhere if they are still interested in the institution. They're going to go overseas and find women who genuinely are. Or you're going to have men altogether say, I'm not even interested in the institution. I'm just going to get what I can get, just like they're trying to get what they can get. In exchange for me providing you the butterflies and the bullshit fairy tale that you want, you're going to give me some sex until I'm tired of it. Then I'm going to go on to the next one. And again, instead of having a thorough and nuanced conversation about this, we would rather frame men as perpetrators and women as victims. Ultimately, like I've said multiple times, part of the issue is that a lot of our women are not taught to see value in us. And because you're not taught to see value in us, it's easier to simply prioritize what we do for you, the tangible things. And you'll hear women talk about, if he don't, then what's the point? Because all men are workhorses. All men are bodyguards and pit bulls and human sex dolls. But outside of that, there is no inherent or intrinsic value that masculinity adds to us. And this is why you see some of these conversations happen so flippantly. But again, despite men's ability to articulate what's happening, they see it, they feel it, they recognize it. And things like passport bros are one of the consequences. And we need to recognize that.
Do you guys have hierarchies in your family?
Yeah, my dad, what he says goes. And that's how it should be, right? And, you know, I honor and I respect him.
So, what was that?
What about your mom?
What about your mom?
What do you mean? My mom is right under my dad. You know, it's my dad, my mom, and then the children. That's how a family...
So what, she has to follow what he says too?
She may disagree, right? They might have a discussion, they might talk, but at the end of the day, a man has to lead the family.
How did I let this big ass red flag slip? Like, if Sean hadn't asked this question, I would not have known any of this man's view on this.
I'm vaguely familiar with this young man. He got a IG following, I believe, a big IG following, primarily because he's a lawyer, pretty successful dude, and he's a virgin. He's saving himself until marriage. You know, me being the cynical dude that I am, I think is bullshit, but let's assume that it's true. Let's assume that he is saving himself in the whole nine. He is, in a lot of ways, in that case, a top 0.05% dude. And he answered this question honestly. The dynamic that he's familiar with, which resulted in his proper rearing and subsequent success, is a hierarchical structure where the father is the father and he's above the mother who is above the children. Now, oftentimes we frame this as value. Dad is more valuable than mom. Mom is more valuable than the kids. The truth is, it's just the order of authority. Now, ironically, a lot of Black people, and specifically Black women, claim to be Christians and claim to subscribe to the Bible, biblical text, and often follow Christian celebrities and musicians in the whole nine. But when you start getting into the nitty-gritty of what does the Bible, what does Christianity say about the family structure, now we're feminists. So I want to use the parts of this religion that suit me, but the parts that remotely resemble my oppression, I don't want anything to do with. And I think it speaks to the fact that people just subscribe to things for convenience and for identity, but they don't thoroughly investigate what it is that they're subscribing to. You'll hear women often say, I want a man of God, without even knowing how to identify if she's a woman of God, if she's living by biblical principles according to what she would like to hold a biblical principled man to. And in our community in particular, our women have no qualms, no issues publicly saying, oh, I'm not submitting myself to no man. Men are not worth that. Men are going to leave you. They're going to cheat on you. They're going to all this negative stuff in one breath. And then in the next breath, claim that they are deserving of top 0.05% men, not understanding that it doesn't work like that. If this man who is relatively successful is saying that this environment produced me and I would like to reproduce this environment for my offspring, and you're not even willing to consider that, you would rather just dismiss him as a chauvinistic, misogynistic pig, as opposed to critique the merits of what he's saying. It goes back to proving part of the reason why some men are taking their business to more traditional women, and some men are opting out altogether. But again, we don't want to talk about the part that we play. As women, we would rather just put all the onus on men.
I have been a single mom for all of 2 years, and I have to say, I hate it here. I don't hate being a mom. I don't hate having kids, but I hate the fact that I only had two options: either stay in an unhealthy, dysfunctional relationship or do it all on my own. And see, when I was a stay-at-home mom, I did the cooking, the cleaning. I was a primary person in charge of taking care of the children. And here I thought that that was a totally different category than being a working mom. As a working mom, I'm literally still doing all of the same stay-at-home mom shit, just on a different schedule. But now with the added mental stress load of how do I pay every bill by myself? And that's not even the part that frustrates me. The kicker is that this is culturally normal and even embraced, that if you're a single mom, you're just going to struggle and that's it. Like, I could be on the brink of a mental breakdown, literally underwater, telling people, like, I do not know how to make this better. And someone will ask me, what's wrong? Are you okay? No, I'm not. And the response is, well, it's hard out here for everybody. And I get it. We all have our challenges. We're all going through our own struggles. But why is it culturally normal for this to be the only other option? Like, at this point, I'm about to start dating other moms to see who wants to co-mother together, because the fact that we're all just isolated but going through the same exact challenges at the same time just feels ridiculous.
I've noticed recently an abundance of content from women complaining about the beds that they made. And what I mean by that is I'm seeing a lot of content from women complaining about being mothers. I'm seeing a lot of content from women complaining about being wives. And just like this example, content from women complaining about single mothers. And in her example, I asked the question, when she framed her previous relationship with their father as toxic or unfulfilling or whatever other words that she used, whose definition was she using? Because again, selfishness and the princess syndrome that we talk about will allow you to frame anything, any kind of way to achieve the outcome that you want. And more often than not, the outcome that you want is sympathy for you and a centering of your perspective, whether or not you deserve that sympathy, and your perspective should be centered. But again, because we're so used to this being the normal paradigm, nobody questions it. Who's to say that the husband was the person who introduced toxicity to their relationship? Who's to say that he wasn't busting his ass? But just like we see with a lot of women, it was never good enough. She was unfulfilled. She couldn't do what she wanted to do. She couldn't be what she wanted to be, even though she chose to be with him and then she chose to have his children. And now, instead of taking responsibility and taking ownership, she would rather frame it as if she was bamboozled and she was tricked into a life that she was unaware of. And that's what makes me say some of these people sound like children. And now the brilliant solution is I'm just going to date other single mothers. And, you know, the late Kevin Samuels even mentioned that this might be one of the outcomes of the direction that we're going. Women are going to start being roommates. They're going to start, since they don't need no man, they're going to be each other's men. They're going to pool their resources and try to make things work that way. Because again, it really boils down to, we don't think we need men. We want men. They'll frame it that way as if it's a compliment. But we ultimately don't need men. And if push comes to shove, we'll just do the Wonder Woman thing and just establish a thriving home community for women by women, despite the fact that we might be raising sons. And like the thesis of this video, things like this are part of the reason why a lot of young men are unenthusiastic about being married or being good men. Because first, just like a Hall of Fame winning football player, you still won't be empathized with. You'll simply just be lambasted for being a sellout. So I can't even get empathy from it. I definitely can't get cooperation because she's not even willing to give up social media for our relationship to work. And even if we get to the point of our relationship working, as fickle as she may be and as childish as she's celebrated for being, tomorrow she might wake up and decide that this isn't what she wants. And then she's going to take the stuff that I worked hard for, including my children, and I will be framed as the bad guy because I wasn't able to scratch some itch that she might not even be able to identify. Now, again, we have to be willing to have an honest and thorough conversation about this, as opposed to our constant reflex of framing Black men and boys as evil. Black men and boys are people. They're reasonable people. And as they continue to observe these patterns, we are disincentivized from wanting any parts of it, especially given family court. Even if you win, you still lose. Even if you're right, you're still wrong. Kind of like the revised episode of the lady who cheated on her husband after losing a bunch of weight. At the end of the video, she talked about how she moved states, taking their child with her, despite the fact that she blew up their marriage. And you expect boys in this particular world, Black boys in particular, to continue to be enthusiastic about marrying and procreating with Black women.
I've noticed an uptick in the last decade of young men who are not dating women reflective of their mother. The first time I really noticed it was a woman I work with. She's a dark-skinned sister, has 2 sons and a daughter. So they took a Christmas photo. The mother's single, the daughter's single. Both of the sons had Latina wives. I didn't know her well enough to bring that up. She hasn't said anything publicly about it that I know of, but I'm looking at this photo and then I see another one and then I see another one. And then I see one in the mall. And when I start really engaging these young men who are the same ones in my classes, they're basically saying the same things I heard individual males say when I was as young as 4th and 5th grade. It's dismissed as a sexual, fetishized, white supremacist oriented, you just want someone with light skin with long hair kind of thing. Nobody actually asks these young men why they're doing what they're doing. And when I ask them, the conversations we have are rarely, if ever, about long hair and light skin. More than often, it's about, she's nice to me. She talks to me. She doesn't talk at me. She doesn't try to control me or tell me what to do. Because again, that has to do with the socialization of men and women, male and female in the Black community. We come out of a dynamic where the head of household is more, in the last half century, has been female.